So, just to situate our audience, Chris, in his role as head of CISA, was called on to guarantee the security of the elections and said after the elections of 2020 that they were, and I'm using the words of the release that was issued, the most secure in American history, and that there was no evidence that any votes were deleted, lost, or compromised. And for that statement of the security and reliability of the elections, Chris Krebs was fired by the Trump administration for standing up for the validity of our elections. Chris, I want to ask you, one day before our midterm elections, why is this threat to our democracy that was so evident in 2020 from President Trump continuing? And what do you tell your Republican friends when they spread what we've taken to calling the big lie, this argument that the 2020 election was stolen?
David, so just to provide some additional context around that statement on November 12th of 2020, not that that date is seared in my brain at all, but that was a assessment by the election administration and election security community, state and local election officials, vendors, other folks that are involved in the actual administration of elections, and that was their assessment. And so CISA, as a part of a coordinating group, issued that statement and amplified the statement. And not only was it deemed to be a safe and secure election, I think the statistics behind that statement stand up. It was certainly the most scrutinized election. We've seen, the intelligence community investigated, reported, secured the election. It was the most litigated, both pre and post election. 8+ lawsuits before the election, 60+ after, and it was the most audited election. So by the time 2020 rolled around, there were 43 states plus the District of Columbia that had some form of post-election audit. So the number of eyeballs that were on that election with no appreciable fraud, as Attorney General Barr pointed out in the wake of the 2020 election, I think supports the statement, supports the assessment of the group. Now, to the point of why does it persist to today, 2 years later? Well, because it pays, frankly. I mean, both financially, it's a great fundraising mechanism for the former president and a number of political officials and candidates for office, as well as elites and influencers, which leads to the second reason of why it persists, because it's a great clout chasing mechanism. I mean, we continue to see sitting officials as well as former administration officials from the last administration, push narratives and push themes and push lies about the election when they should know better. If not, they certainly could find out how elections are actually administered. But it gets them engagement, and there are a number of studies that show when influencers, elites, or candidates post about normal, mundane issues that we should be talking about, like inflation, like the border. Instead, they post about these election lies, and it gets them additional engagement. So it's a benefit to them from an incentive perspective. And I think the real harm is that it is shifting the Overton window. It's shifting what's politically acceptable in American political discourse into something that's much more dangerous and much more violent. So